OnShape Exercise 10. This drawing may look a little complex, but the point is not the complexity of the drawing. I'm going to show you some features, and I've kind of crammed them all into one here. So if you need to, pause the video, rewind, or ask for help as needed. So we're going to start with a simple sketch. And this is going to look like it's not making sense at first, but we're going to select the top plane, N for normalize, and we're going to start by drawing as if the part was not three parts. We're going to draw it all as one, and we're going to create the shapes we need as we go using some features. What this is going to allow you to do is separate parts and create features that you would otherwise have to draw very complexly and do it in a whole bunch of different views to get everything to fit together. So I'm going to show you a way to create complex interlocking features without having to make them complex. So let's start with a simple sketch, and everything kind of is dimensioned off of this center point circle. So I'm going to use a center point circle on the origin just to lock everything in, and the outer dimension for the bigger one is 1.25. The inner one is 0.75. And from there, I'm going to do this a little interesting. So we have a couple ways that you could do this, and there's more than one way to do everything in this program. So if you want to start kind of branching out on your own and trying some different methods, that's up to you. But if you want to follow along, that's okay. So I like the idea of having a construction line to make sure that I have everything centered. So I'm going to use my line tool in construction to make that dotted line. And I'm going to use my line tool again, and I'm going to start drawing in that shape. And I don't have to be super precise. I just need to get the generics of the shape. And it does help if when you want things to be 90, you wait for them to snap, or you force a constraint in there. And I'm going to start moving my dimensions from the back side in. So this dimension is 3.5. My total height is 2.5. And you can see that I'm starting to get a little off here. It might be hard to see, but the difference between the top and the bottom here is not the same. So I'm going to throw in a dimension to force these to split that center line properly. And I want 1.25. So that locks in my height. Now my length of this line is 1.5. I want the top and bottom lines to be the same, so I'll go ahead and set those as equal. And I want these two lines to be tangent with that circle. So T for tangent. And everything's locked in. I'm going to use M for trim. And I'm going to trim off the excess. So there's a lot of things missing in this sketch, but I'm going to show you ways that you can make your life easier. So let's start by extruding this out. So we're going to green check mark, go to our 3D view, and we're going to extrude this. So I'm actually going to start by extruding the flat plate. So let's go ahead and go to extrude. We're going to choose this shape, and I definitely want this to go down. So I'm going to choose down, and 0.375 or 3/8 of an inch is the thickness, and I'm going to click the green check mark. So in other exercises I showed you that you can reactivate a sketch and extrude again from the exact same sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude, select that outer ring, and I'm going to choose second end position. So what this allows me to do, I can make them both go the same direction. I can make them go opposite directions. So we had symmetric, and when I choose symmetric, it's going to make it a depth of 1 inch total. So 1 inch from here to here, and it's going to put that sketch in the center. If I choose second end position, what I can then do is I can set them to different lengths. So it's a little hard to tell at first which one is which, but once you start adding in some dimensions, it does make it a little easier to see. So I have 0.75 and I have 1.625, or 3/4 and 1 5/8. And that is the correct orientation, but if it was wrong, you would just flip both directions and then you can have that go the other direction. So I'm going to flip that and I'm going to click OK. So I have created this feature, but whenever we're working with this, we're going to actually make that a separate part. So in my extrude, I can go back by double-clicking extrude here, and if you're not sure which one is which, when you hover over it, it kind of highlights it. You click it once, it highlights the entire extrusion. So if I double-click it, I can then change it. So I'm going to switch this from add to new. And when I click the green check mark again, you can see that it's a different color, but it's also a completely different part. So you don't have to do this, but I just wanted to show you. So I'm going to use transform XYZ, and I need to select the part that I want to move. This just allows you to move things in the 3D space, so you can see that that's its own part. So I've made that entire part separate from this one. So I'm going to get rid of my transform there because I want it to be attached there. So it's kind of just a quick way of, from the same sketch, creating a brand new part. The other thing I want to show you is creating a, well, it's called a Boolean Subtract. So you can use another part as your tool to cut the new part. So on your drawing, you can see that there's some tabs on the back of here, and there's two parts that fit together. So you don't actually have to draw those into both parts when you have features that interlock like that. You can use one part to create the other. So I'm going to create a sketch here on the back, N for normalize, and I'm just going to start with my line tool, and I'm going to start up in this corner, come down, over, force a constraint there, back up, the tab comes over, down, over, up, and to the corner. I need a couple dimensions here, so I need my total height, and my total height is 1 1/8. The width of this tab is 0.75, and the other tab is the same width. So if I choose this line and that line, I missed, undo, try it again. So I want that one and that one. They're now the same length. And my whole sketch is now black. I just want to add in those two whole features. So I'm going to use my construction line again. So line and then construction. And I'm going to draw a line across. This is just going to save me having to dimension so many things. So I'm going to create a dimension for that. And it is 0.375. Circle. Make sure it's coincident with that. Same thing with this one. So the only thing left is to dimension the circles, and I only need to dimension 1, 3/8 again. I can use my equal constraint to set those equal. And the advantage, again, of using constraints is if I wanted to change the size of both of these circles, I would only have to change the one that's dimensioned because they're linked together. I'm going to dimension this circle's center to the edge. We got 0.5. And the same thing over here. This can be a little difficult to get, so just make sure when you hover over it, it highlights that center circle. 0.5. Okay, so similar process as before. I'm going to extrude. I'm going to select this shape, but you can see that it brought in some of the geometry, so it didn't actually grab all of that. And I'm going to use New. I'm going to flip the direction, and my depth is 0.375. So that creates a new part, but you can see the colors are kind of blurring together. And every time you create a new part, it changes the color. You might get repeating colors. As long as they don't touch, they won't be the same color. Or they will. If they don't touch, they can be the same color. But if they don't touch, if they do touch, they will never be the same color. So right now I have this part and this part existing in the same space. So I'll show you that really quick. Take this part and move it away. You can see that it still exists. So I haven't gotten rid of anything yet. So I'm going to delete my transform move there. And I'm going to use a feature called Boolean. And what this does is it allows you to use a shape as a tool and subtract that shape from another shape. So I have this plate and I want to subtract the tabs of this part from that plate. So I'm going to use subtract. I want to keep my tools, because if I didn't select that, when I select, let's say my tool is the first thing it wants me to select that. The target is what's going to have stuff removed from it, so I'm going to select the other part. Now you can see it went opaque or clear or whatever it's called. So you can't really see it. You can just see a ghosting image. If I select keep tool, that means it's going to keep that part, but it's going to subtract anything that it overlaps with. So if I hit the green check mark, now you can see that it has subtracted that material. So it's just kind of a quick, easy way where I didn't have to dimension everything on this part, and I didn't have to dimension everything on this part to perfectly line up. I just created the part I wanted and subtracted it out of there. So this is the whole point of all of this, is when you 3D print something, if I tried to 3D print this part, where would I set it on the table? It only prints in layers, so if it sat like this, it would have to print support material under all of this because it's liquid hot molten plastic. And if I tried to just squeeze it out in midair like this, it would droop down. So what I can do is I can take these individual parts, lay them flat on the printer, and then assemble them later. So there's a big advantage to being able to create separate parts, even if it's not intended to be separate parts in the completed item. So it's just another tool in your arsenal for completing all of this. And let's go ahead and create our last feature. Now, this last feature is called an offset. And it offsets, so if I choose sketch, this, and I try my offset feature. So because the sketch is here, it's going to offset based off of my original sketch. If you ever have an issue where that's not working, you have a couple of options. So the first option that I can do is suppress. So I can suppress that Boolean. It still exists, it's just not being shown. I can also turn off the visibility of my part. So it's just a way of making things easier for when you create new features. So because that's suppressed and that part is no longer visible, it's not going to affect anything that I want to do to this surface. So I want to use Sketch, select that surface, offset, and if I select that surface again, you can see that it's making a shape the exact same as the outside edge of that surface. I can use this to go bigger. I could use it to go smaller. For this one, we're going to go 0.625 inward. So make sure you drag it inward before you put that measurement in. Click the green check mark. If I want to check and make sure I'm not going to hit anything, I can unsuppress my features. And to access that menu, it's a right click. I'm sorry if I didn't say that before. And I'm going to use my extrude, take that last feature, change it to remove, and the depth of that little pocket is 1/4 inch, 0.25. Green check mark. And that completes exercise 10. Make sure that you take a screenshot of this, either this view or the opposite side. I want to be able to see the pocket, the tabs, and that you have these as separate parts. Make sure you submit that screenshot to Canvas for a grade.